For those who don't know, my name is Jonathan Niki. I'm the president of Kellogg College, so very warm welcome to the college from everyone. My task this evening is to introduce Dr Judith Hillier, who's in charge of the events, and very well placed to be so. Judith is a member of the college's governing body, was vice president, among other roles in the college, and is associate professor in the teaching of science, and is on the council of the Institute of Physics, vice president for learning and skills. But just before I hand over, I thought I should declare an interest in this day and age, which is that Anne McLaren, in whose name this is in honour of, was my mother. She had 3 children, me and her 2 sisters, Susan and Caroline, who are here. Sorry, daughters. 2 daughters, 3 children, Susan, Caroline, and me. In the obituaries and the letters we got when she died, I think that the 2 things which came through, which I liked the most, was about how she supported everyone really, but particularly young women scientists. And it was they all said about how she used to go around her lab at the end of the day and force them all to stop working and go home to their families. And the other thing they said is she'd never agreed to have her name on the joint publication. She insisted their journal articles should just have their names on, even when she had done much of the work, which I liked. But anyway, Judith, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and very warm welcome to our annual Anne McLaren Lecture, where we remember the work of Dr. Anne McLaren, a leading geneticist and stem cell scientist, whose one of her many achievements was the world's first IVF birth with mice in the 50s. And her contribution to science was recognised in many ways, but including her becoming a Fellow of the Royal Society and the first ever woman officer of the Royal Society as Foreign Secretary and Vice President. I remember visiting the Royal Society in London as an Education Research Fellow some years ago, and seeing her portrait there was special. Anne cared very deeply about supporting other women to succeed in science, helping to found the Association of Women in Science, which takes an inclusive approach to supporting all who identify as women in their scientific careers. But before I move on to introduce the panel, there are a couple of important points to make. Talking about women in science are seen as very woke. And I do recognise that a discussion about equity, diversity and belonging being hosted by the University of Oxford might be seen as being problematic on many levels. We are an institution that has spent centuries perfecting the art of elitism, perpetuating inequality by excluding so many who are of the wrong social class, the wrong gender, the wrong religious faith, the wrong skin colour. This institution was at the heart of British Empire, the invasion, colonisation and exploitation of many people groups around the world, and in many ways still perpetuates coloniality of thinking and behaviour. If there is going to be change, then this institution needs to be part of that discussion. And we can see that happening. 2 weeks ago, Afua Hirsch was talking at the Blavatnik School of Government about the concept of the West and how we need to unpick our language and the way we talk about things if we're going to bring about change. The very same night, our latest Bynum Tudor Fellow, Michel Hussain, was talking here at Kellogg about the way that empire changed the lives of her family. My second point is that though our title is Women in Science, this is not just about women, and nor is it anti-man. The Sex Discrimination Act might have become law before I was born, but the experience of many women studying STEM, particularly in the fields of physics, computer science and engineering, is still very far from equitable, and that is true for many other underrepresented groups. So we are going to talk about some of the issues, but we're going to try and focus on the positives, the solutions, the ways to help each other, the ways to be allies for others. And the advice that I'm hoping that my learned and beloved friends are going to give should be good advice for any young person or younger person who's trying to forge their career in science. So that's enough for me. I'm going to introduce our speakers. So we are absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Dame Kay Davies, who worked with Anne for many years, who is the Emeritus Dr. Lees Professor of Anatomy, along with lots of other titles and accolades, who's one of her fields of research, but a key one is the genetic basis of neuromuscular and neurological disorders, and has spent much of the last 20 years looking into treatments for muscular dystrophy and spinal muscular dystrophy, among other things. We have Professor Niki Trigoni from the Department of Computer Science, whose research interests lie in intelligent and autonomous sensor systems, with applications in positioning, healthcare, environmental monitoring, and smart cities, just to name a few. And last but not least, Dr. Hilary Wynne, Senior Research Associate from the Faculty of Linguistics, Philology, and Phonetics. This is just really to prove that science is everywhere, okay? And her research involves experimentally investigating using psycholinguistic behavioral techniques and neurological linguistic approaches, the extent to which underlying patterns govern the processes of sounds in related languages. So you will see that between the four of us, we cover quite a range of the sciences, and also the university departments and faculties, with myself being a physicist who now works in education and social science. We also have quite a wide experience of university roles and committees, and of science organisations at the national level. So, I'm going to stop talking, I'm going to ask a question. Back in early 2007, Anne McLaren gave an interview to the Nature magazine where she was asked if she was encouraged to study science. And her response was no. She was entered for a course in English literature, only had 8 months to prepare and couldn't quite face reading all of the set texts and analysing them in that time. So decided to study biology instead and loved it. So, questions for each of you. Was there a pivotal moment in your career in science? And why and who helped at that particular moment in time? Okay, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I mean, Anne was iconic and inspirational. So that's the first thing. My first challenge was when I decided to change subject, because I came from a working class background. I was told I'd only get into Oxford if I studied chemistry, which is probably true, because I'd never done biology at school, because you had to choose between biology and Latin in order to be able to get into Oxford in those days. And it was the inspiration of my tutors, male and female, then, who encouraged me to do my research year in biology, in biochemistry, and I haven't looked back since. So I think the message is, do what you're passionate about. You may start in the wrong place, but if you really want to get there and you're tenacious, you can.
Thank you all for coming and having us here. So for me, one of the pivotal points is when, after I started as an academic in Oxford, where I had the opportunity to work alongside, in a cross-disciplinary area, alongside other brilliant people in computer science and engineering. The head of department at the time decided in his infinite wisdom to sort of say, why does Niki not want to to direct a new center in autonomous intelligent machines and systems together from the Department of Computer Science, which was a joint effort between engineering and computer science. And being involved in this kind of initiative gave me the opportunity to work in sort of cross-disciplinary areas in related fields, and really broadened my kind of research horizon. And so I was really glad he said it, and he trusted me at this point, although I was not a senior academic at the time, and I learned a huge amount from that sort of experience, and to really appreciate his help there.
So my pivotal moment was when I was 5 years old. I was sent to a very evangelical school in the States where they told all the girl students that they didn't need to know math unless they were in the kitchen. So they did not teach me math for the first 3 years of my school time. And so I was quite delayed when it came to switching schools and being put into the normal classes. And throughout sort of my elementary, grade school, high school, I was always a bit behind in math. And I sort of got an idea that I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it. But I still really was interested in it. I learned to fly planes when I was 16. And you need some math for that, at least when I was doing it. And I sort of continued my interest in this throughout my university days, and finally a mentor believed in me and said, why don't you start looking at the psychology of language? So for me, it was mentorship that really, really got me going in this. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's a really big obstacle, not being allowed to learn maths. Hilary, are there any other obstacles in your career in science, and how did you navigate those?
So I'm in the humanities. So a lot of what I learned, I taught myself, or I took the initiative to go and learn through workshops. I work with EEG, I work with behavioral responses, I do eye tracking and fMRI when I can get time on the machine. And all of that training I was mentored through, but I decided I wanted to do myself. And it was just sort of, you know, believing in myself enough and having others believe in me that I can go to an fMRI workshop and I can keep up there and I can understand what's being taught, even though I haven't done a degree in physics. So it was, I think, you know, just really the motivation.
Brilliant, thank you. Niki, what about you? What have been some of your obstacles in your career in science, and how did you navigate those?
Well, there has been quite there's always the very small setbacks, like you may have sort of a grant application rejected, you may have papers rejected that can sort of make you feel, am I good enough, or can I keep going there? But where I would say it was like the most challenging time, it was around the time that I had very, very young, sort of like babies, and it was a time where we had 3 children in a row every couple of years. And it was a period that I don't remember very much because of the lack of sleep, right? Honestly, it was, my mind was foggy. I felt I was underperforming in almost everything. And it was really good at the time that I just sort of said, just keep going, right? And after I went out of that phase, things looked, you know, the world looked quite good, the world of science, right? Was very, very rewarding again, and managed to push the career forward. So I would say that for any people who are at this sort of younger stage, just be gentle with yourself and keep going, and you know, things get much, much easier afterwards.
Yeah, well, just picking up on Hilary's point about mentorship, I was in the Weatherall Institute of Molecular Medicine here, that many of you know, and surrounded by medics, and most of them were male, if not all of them were male. And they all had tenured jobs, and I got to the end of my 5-year fellowship and I didn't have tenure. So I had to go back to the MRC and say, I'm the only woman in the institute who's a project leader, and I'm the only person who doesn't have tenure. And he said, well, then you'll have to move to London. Now, those days are gone, but nevertheless, the important point is that AWiSE recognised that I could do science, tried to support me, and I had a sponsor. And I think sponsors are different from mentors. You need, whether it's male or female, you need someone who will sponsor your career, who will put you forward for your next stage of your career all the time. And why do the men always win the prizes? Because they have sponsors who put them forward all the time. And I think that's something where we should join with the men to make sure that there is good equality in sponsorship for fellowships, writing of grants, because sometimes women don't have enough confidence to think they can do it. They always write grants for less money, because when I was at the Wellcome Trust, a significantly different, I don't know what it's like in computer science, but in biology, the men used to conflate what they needed, whereas we'd only ever write, we being the women, would only write what we really needed. So you need a good sponsor and that sort of advice in addition to the mentorship.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Now, if I asked you to describe a scientist, you'd probably come out with somebody who's very objective, that things are black and white and right and wrong. But as we all know, it's actually much more complicated than that. And ethics is a huge part of it as well. And ethics was a very huge part in Anne McLaren's role. She was led in writing the regulations for the ethics around IVF in Britain. And I thought I'd come back to asking people, what role do ethics play in your work? Niki, shall we start with you? Because you're possibly not the most obvious person to think about ethics, but actually there's a huge amount of ethics in computer science.
Absolutely. My area is in AI for systems, right? So developing intelligent systems that can find application in different sort of scenarios and contexts. And here, I mean, ethics plays a huge role, right? You have to basically think about several things, like are the AI algorithms sort of aligned with the intentions and the preferences of the people, and are they aligning with the social norms where they're being applied? Do they incorporate biases because they've been trained in data that have biases, right? Our societies have biases, so they can perpetuate those biases. So, for example, if you take a case where, say, you're using AI for sort of autonomous vehicles and there is an accident, right? What are the ethics around it? Who is to be accountable? Or if you have, say, AI that improves workforce efficiency, what about the privacy concerns? And how do you trade these things? In medicine, I guess, we use AI for diagnostics. You use increasingly AI for diagnostics. What if there is an error, right? And of course, you may have even a much smaller percentage of errors done by the AI algorithms, but when they do happen, say, by people, and as they get better and better, this will be the case. But when an error happens, then what's the accountability and what are the consequences of that? So there's always there's very diverse sort of ethics issues that we need to worry about.
So in terms of ethics, we do a lot of field work, and we do a lot of field work in various communities, various locations, and we take our equipment with us. We collect linguistic data. We collect recordings from people, both brain and speech and responses. And one thing the university is very good at, actually, is training its researchers on fieldwork and working with those communities and making sure you're not taking advantage of those communities and you're not just going there, collecting data and leaving. It's hugely important to interact with the researchers there, with the communities there. Things as simple as if you're working with a community of people who can't read, who are illiterate, how do you consent them? Because we usually consent by having them sign a form. So just throughout my postdoc, I've been able to learn a lot about research ethics, about what it means to be a researcher, what it means to interact with the people that you're researching, and the subjects and the participants that you're using, and making sure that, you know, what you're leaving behind is the right thing, the most significant thing, and you're not just going and taking and you're gathering data and just leaving. Yeah.
Thank you. Niki's just mentioned, I mean, genetic testing, we had to have the Genetics Advisory Committee very early on, actually in the days when Anne was around, participating in that. But when the Chinese cloned a baby, then we had to set up a Genetic Advisory Commission that was international to determine how different countries around the world might deal with this data. And in fact, that many of you will know that Chinese scientist was then jailed for doing an unethical experiment, but nevertheless left us with the dilemma, is science going faster than the ethical issues that it was presenting? And so I, in collaboration with colleagues in New York, chaired between the Royal Society and National Academy this commission. But the important point I'd like to make is it has to be international. But because there are so many differences in the different countries, we had 32 countries on the commission, and each one had a slightly different take about what was permissible in their country, what they could persuade their government to legislate for, and what they couldn't. So I think anything we do in science, we have to think about the international dimension. and the ethical dimension of that.
Thank you very much. When you take the time to read about Anne McLaren, you will very quickly become aware that she was quite public-facing. She was not one of these scientists that hid away in her lab and didn't talk to anybody. And so I'm going to ask each of our three people, do you think it is important for scientists to be visible to the public, and why? And Kay, I'm going to start with you.
I think that's obvious. I think many people, sorry, I didn't want to make it a simplistic question, but we don't get out there enough to explain to the public what the difference of science means, whatever science it is. And I think what's happening in the United States tells us, I didn't really want to raise that, but it's an issue, because if they understood how important science was, a lot of what's happening wouldn't be happening. And I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of ignorance in this country. We're much better. I used to say, when I used to go to the States on conferences, you could turn the television on and you'd see a science report. You can no longer do that. I only hope that Europe and the rest of the world will continue on that banner, because it's so important. We cannot deliver the science we generate unless we involve the public, because it's all about trust.
Very much agrees with that. I mean, trust is a very, very important thing. I mean, there are a couple of points here. It's if you sort of are giving public talks about your research, there's benefits to the public, obviously, because the public is getting to grips with what's going on, and sort of science moves at a really, really fast pace, right? And in my area, in AI for systems, you see, like, every year there are new advances that you couldn't even, ourselves working in the area could not even imagine before, let alone the public. So being able to sort of discuss and understand what are the implications, how science and scientific advances sort of find their way into the real world. Are they accepted? Are they going to be trusted? Is hugely important. But I think it's also important for the people who do the public speaking. It's good for your career. It's good because you are getting feedback from the public, right? If you're developing a technology that will be used by the public and you're not informed by the public opinion, then you're not truly doing your job properly. So I think that's another reason why, you know, discussing your work in public is very, very important.
Yeah, continuing on with the informing part of that, I think that's really important because I find that the public and the people who, you know, particularly in my field, the people who use the language, the people who are interacting in the communities that I'm studying. For example, right now I'm studying specialized language that experts learn when you become an expert in a field. And I'm studying pilots, obviously, because, you know, I was interested in it to begin with. But through, like, sort of planning my experiments, planning my research, I'm able to go to that community and say, hey, does this look right? Does this seem like it's the right thing to do? And they are eager to work with us. They want to inform us. And oftentimes they can inform us in the right direction that's much clearer, that will get us better science, get us better results. And then we can work together. So I think that informing to move forward is really important.
Absolutely, thank you. I've already said, I think earlier on, that Anne was a founding member of the Association of Women in Science and Engineering, and they still give out the AWiSE Awards. And so I'm going to ask a question. To what extent do you think it's important for scientists to be involved in equity and diversity work? And which scientists should be doing that work? Hilary, I'm going to start with you.
Every scientist should be doing that work, obviously. I think it's hugely important that we recognize, obviously, that we are very, very lucky to be where we are, doing what we're doing. And that not everyone has that chance. Not everyone has that same opportunity to do what we're able to do. There are large amounts of underrepresented groups that are struggling to do science, to interact in the scientific communities, to get published. I mean, the issues with publication bias of in the global south is unbelievable, down to what your last name is when you publish it, or when you turn in a paper, when you you know, give an article, when you submit a paper. That's the word I was looking for. If your last name doesn't look Western enough, they'll tell you to get a native speaker, English speaker, to read. Yeah, I see a lot of people nodding, to read your work, when you could be a native English speaker, and it doesn't really matter. So I think it's, yes, hugely, hugely important.
Totally agree. Diversity, I mean, engaging in this area is really, really important for all sorts of sciences. But in my area, specifically in systems, we have got a huge shortage of women, right? I mean, it is a real problem. Computer science more generally, systems in particular. It is really important to encourage women to sort of join in areas that are underrepresented, because the diversity of opinion and the optics are so much different. So I see that, like, when we have research meetings with multiple genders or even multiple ethnicities, right? And you get ideas that are quite different no one would sort of think about it by themselves. And even when technology and science goes into kind of application, again, the diversity of opinion there is really important. So absolutely.
I just want to add a bit of data. I'm on a board of companies. It's very trendy now to run these little tests to see what quadrant you're in personality. And what is absolutely clear is that women contribute differently from men. And it's hugely important at any level, whether you're in university, education, teaching, whatever, that you need that diversity of thought. Maybe the world would be a better place if we were more diverse.
I'm going to slightly stir things up a bit. I think, Kay, this might apply more to you because you've been working in this institution for longer. When you're one of the few women in the room, do you keep being given the jobs to do about equity and diversity?
You get all the jobs anyway. Not necessarily anymore, but you certainly used to.
Yeah.
And I think whatever you set up in equality and diversity now, there are always men that work with you. So I think it's completely changed. So I'm much more optimistic that it's much more teamwork going forward than it used to be.
I quite enjoy when in certain conferences and so on, when we have equality and diversity meetings and meetings supporting women in science, I see a lot of men joining. And this is really, really nice because a lot of the advice that we give during those kind of events is applicable to both genders, right? And more I see male colleagues being supportive of women at different sort of stages of their career. So I think that times are changing very, very fast, and I'm so pleased about that. And I think that, as you are saying, yes, we get involved in those events, but they're also enjoyable.
Yeah, so I've been the early career representative on multiple committees at the university level. I served on council for several years as well. And I think I agree. Yes, we were asked to do work, but now more and more we're going to see men stepping up, particularly at the early career level. Early career researchers are really, really supportive of one another because we're all facing the same troubles, the same difficulties, the fixed term contracts, job security issues around, starting off your life and trying to figure out how you're going to, do things like raise a family when you're on a fixed term contract or a 0 hours contract. And I think we're finding more and more equality in the support that we're giving to one another and that we're getting. So yes, we're on a lot of committees. I'm on a lot of committees, but so are a lot of people. So people generally are taking, I think, more and more of a stance and support, yeah.
So I'm now going to ask you, what key piece of advice would you give to anybody who's interested in a career in science, particularly somebody who might be from a background that is currently underrepresented in science?
Do what you're passionate about, which I've already mentioned, but also life's full of setbacks. Don't worry about the setbacks, just learn from the setbacks and be tenacious. You have a goal, you know where you need to go. Focus, stick with it, try and get a sponsor to support you, and enjoy it.
I totally agree. You stole my answer. But well, I would like to add one more thing. I would say pick an area to work on that can be really impactful, that you enjoy working in. I totally agree. I think this is the most important, right? If you're not enjoying working in something, it's not going to work very well. but also that other people care about that sort of area. And sort of, if you work hard and if you make some sort of progress and you get somewhere, this matters for society. I think this can be rewarding, you know, in a scale of like 5, 10, 20 years, if you don't just see what I need to do for next year, but what is something that is worthwhile taking on and doing that has long-term benefits.
So, as somebody who has a background that's not in science, that have pivoted more to social science, I would say to anyone who is interested in scientific theories, in research, don't be afraid to ask the question. Be curious. If you have an idea, follow through with it and seek out the people around you that you think could help you sort of research that and investigate that idea. Don't think, you know, the number of students and the number of junior researchers I've had come to me in the humanities and say, oh, I can't do coding, oh, I can't do, you know, math, I didn't do my A-levels in anything but English. Coding's a language, as you well know. A lot of what we do translates to language skills. And I can guarantee that after about a year of Python, you'll be fine. So don't be afraid to seek out, you know, people like myself, people like ourselves that want to share our knowledge and what we've done. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, we did prepare some questions, but actually this is a discussion that is meant to involve you as well. So we're going to see if there are any questions from the audience. Now, as all good teachers know, you have to give the audience a little bit of thinking time. So whilst you're thinking, I'll remind you, you can ask a question to any particular person. Can we see where the roving mic is? Is the roving mic at the back? Okay. So would anybody like to go first with the first question? No questions at all. My goodness. We've got a question here at the front. Thank you.
Well, only really to get the discussion going. My question is about everyday sexism and how you deal with that, whether you encountered it. So an example, at UCL, I'm a professor at UCL, and we have various different, as all universities do, we have an academic board, which is basically the professorial group. And it was very, and I talk quite a lot at it often, and the provost before last, it was always really remarkable that he would say, Professor so-and-so, you know, Professor so-and-so, Susan. You know, there's just this little thing. And there was some drinks reception for Fellows of Learned Society, so I went up to him and I said, you know, I'm sure you're not aware that you're doing this. And I just told him. And I've never seen any bits like in the cartoons where they just pivot on their heels and walk straight off. He just couldn't handle it. So I was just wondering how, I mean, I'm pleased I said it, but obviously, you know, kind of a lot of people are worried about if you do raise it, are you being too petty? Or often women will be seen as aggressive if you know, raise things like that. So my question is just whether you've had experiences of that and how you dealt with it.
I think the answer is lots of experience like that. But I think if we don't object, then we're not going to make any progress. I think the worst thing is when you're in a committee and the chairman will repeat what you've just said as if he'd just said it. Whereas they would say, oh, I like your comment, Professor, whatever it is. And it's the unconscious bias. You've just got to tell people that that's what, it's not right, that what the way they're presenting things. And if you don't say it, then we're not going to make any progress, unfortunately. But I think we are making progress, slow but sure. I think the other problem is if you look around and some very eminent woman, another dame from this university, stood up the other day and said, you know, the real problem here is the men won't retire. So you've got all these senior men that are 60 plus, and none of you are going to move on for another 10 years. So where does that leave equality? It's worth thinking about, because it means it's going to take a generation. But we need to be ready for it, and not negative, and certainly not bitter.
I would like to add only one thing, that in addition to basically standing up and sort of mentioning those things when they are said, I would say also have a thick skin, and often like if that impacts in any way your thoughts about how you should sort of move on with your career or with your work, or I think that's already, you know, their job. That like maybe they don't do it on purpose, but maybe it's something that sort of influences you in a bad way. So having a bit of being a little bit oblivious to those things in a way, and having a thick skin is quite a good thing, and not letting it influence any of your sort of future steps.
I'm too junior to be called anything but Hilary in most committee meetings. So I don't think I have as much experience with that. I do have experience with individuals acting like they're very interested in my research, and it turns out they're not actually interested in my research, but they're interested in something else. I see some nodding going on. So I think we're all familiar with that. And it is getting better. It is getting much better. Certainly in terms of contemporary individuals, early career researchers, I don't see that as much. But yeah.
And I think it's also about calling it out on the behalf of others. I think particularly when you get to a slightly more senior position, when you see stuff happening, to say, no, that's not okay, that's racism, that's sexism, and that needs to be called out. But yeah, thank you for the question, Susan. Professor Susan. Any other questions? You've had plenty of time to think now.
I was just going to ask, is there, besides your obvious interests in research areas, is there a subject that maybe you would have studied if you had had all of the opportunities open to you when you were younger and before the point where you had to really focus in on your area of interest?
I think if I'd have done biology, GCSE, biology A level, I probably would have done medicine, but I'm not sure I would have practiced medicine, because I don't think I could face the everyday patients. I'm much better at doing the research. But it would have given me a broader background. As it was, I had to learn it from scratch, which wasn't a bad thing. But I think, yeah, maybe I'd have done medicine. But I wouldn't have gone into Oxford to do medicine, so it was still good to get into Oxford with chemistry.
I think in my case, I probably would have done either what I'm doing now, so computer science would still probably be my first choice if I had to choose again today. But I would say maths would be the other sort of related topic that really attracted me. And I have to say that my family were equally supportive for me to choose either. So it was purely my decision. So I'm thankful for that.
Honestly, if I had been taught math from the proper age, who knows what I could achieve. I wouldn't, if you'd asked me 20 years ago if I would expect that I'd be here doing this and talking about science, I would not have believed it. My first degrees were in medieval literature, so it's quite a wide range. But yeah, I have no idea.
I was really lucky. I had a physics teacher at school who really encouraged me to do physics, and I had parents who encouraged me, and so I ended up in physics. And then again, academics at university who were like, yeah, go and do a PhD. And I was really fortunate to have that. I had that pivotal moment, though, halfway through my PhD, going, I do not want to spend the next 10 years of my life following. My husband's 5 years older than me, doing postdocs around the world, having a marriage across 2 different continents. I'm going into teaching, and actually, funnily enough, having left academia, I ended up back here. But it was luck, and I think it goes back to that advice. Follow what you really want, and you will find a route through, and you will end up with a lot of the things that you want if you work hard at it. But don't let other people force you into decisions you don't want to make.
Thank you so much. My question is about your experience of sexism and of that of your colleagues. Has it caused, from what you've observed, those who've experienced casual sexism to leave academia and move elsewhere, not only just for financial remuneration, but to get away from the sexism. I say that because I'm a former board secretary and head of private office at a very prominent UK public body. And one of the things that I noticed is that although the majority of the staff in that body were female, a lot of the senior posts were held by male, and the board members and the chair, again, male, and the chair used to refer to female board members as girls, and he would, and the sexism was just accepted, and it was appalling. Now, as a result, many of the female senior scientists, they left. They just couldn't put up with it, and they thought we can be paid better and be treated better if we work in pharma or in a research institution. So I just, from your experience of that, or of your of colleagues, have you noticed that casual sexism, which hasn't been addressed, has that prompted an outflow of very bright scientists to go elsewhere? Thank you.
I think it used to be a big time problem because we used, I mean, my ex-husband was a chemist, or is a chemist here actually, and he used to, or any female graduate students came to talk to me to prevent them from giving up on science, because for exactly the reason that you're talking about, because they're looking at those role models. There are no female role models, so I think it's our job really to keep on having public speaking events to make sure that these women realise it really is possible and easy, and that they can get support. If we don't do that, we won't change the system.
I think my experience has been with abuses of power. So I left a graduate program because there was a very serious issue with casual sexism and the way in which women were treated by individuals in power. And most of the individuals that were with me in that program did not return to academia. So I think, you know, there's also levels of power differential there that really factor into it. It's gotten better. I haven't seen it around me lately, but you still hear things.
I have to say that at least myself, I haven't experienced any sort of sexism within the Department of Computer Science. We are very few, and probably they look after us quite well. But and there's a very sort of strict policy against any harassment, any sexism in the department. So I have found actually Oxford to be a very, very pleasant environment in that sense, at least in the computer science department. So.
Also, internationally, it's different. If you go to India, it used to be a terrible place for women. Now, there are an awful lot of very successful women in all branches of science, and so there's no sexism. The Chinese, actually, are amazingly welcome, male or female. So it is a cultural difference that we really have to work on, but not just for UK PLC, for the whole world, I feel. Don't be too ambitious, but you know what I mean.
Are there any more questions that anybody would like to ask?
Kate, you mentioned the maybe bringing on a few retirements as a possible strategy for encouraging some turnover and some more progress for people more earlier on in their career. Is there anything else that you think the University of Oxford should be doing that maybe they're not, or just not doing enough of at the moment?
I think some of that's management training. Actually, the best way to recruit the best talent is to recruit the best talent young and grow them up. Industry already is recognising this, and we don't do enough, in my view, of that. Recognise some of the really strong women in their 30s or 40s now, and then back them all the way. They do it in medicine. John Bell's one example. He's just retired as Research Professor of Medicine. There's someone who came in age 30 when I first met him, and is being followed all the way through. That's the sort of thing we really need. Spot the superstars and support them, and particularly the women, because I don't think the women necessarily have the confidence or feel they have the support of the institution when they start.
I think there's another question there. Thank you.
I'm Edith Sim and was head of pharmacology here for many years. I just, one of the things we haven't talked about is family responsibility. And I think that has been what really has been an issue in holding women back. I've been very encouraged by what people have said, but I'd just like whether the panel feel that the environment is much better than it was. It seems to me that it is, but perhaps that's just my view of it as a grandmother now. I'd like to hear your comments about that.
So I'm in the privileged position of having one of my children sat in the audience. But I started at this university with one very small child and then had a second. It's really hard. And what's really hard is all the research seminars that are scheduled at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is exactly when you need to go and pick up from childcare. And it's all that juggling of the after, they want to do hobbies and absolutely they should be able to do things. I've been incredibly lucky. I've had colleagues around me who've been very supportive and have understood that and have respected the decisions that I've made, and I'm pleased with the decisions that I made. But you do have to make choices. I get the feeling that it's changing slightly as men are suddenly realising what childcare involves and how much it costs and what they might have to do. But I'm going to hand over to Kay to get her perspective.
Thank you. Yes, you do have to make choices, but that's only for part of your life. Yeah. I say it's temporary, it isn't. Looking after your child is not a temporary thing. So I don't mean to say that, but it is. The main responsibility when you actually have to leave and have maternity leave is temporary. And comes back to your point where, if the university would sponsor some women, highlight and give them the opportunity to come through, give them the confidence. Actually, 6 years maternity leave, and Carol Robinson here, who took time off completely to have her 3 children, and now is a highly successful institute director at University of Oxford on mass spectrometry. So you can do it. Yeah, I think it's just a case of, again, highlighting that and emphasising actually to our male colleagues that it is only temporary. And with teamwork, as you've just mentioned, your colleagues can be incredibly supportive. What they won't tolerate, I have to say, is women that abuse the system, who come up and say, well, I'm not going to do whatever it is, in spite of the fact, 3 months earlier, before they knew they were pregnant, they were going to do it, because men feel quite rightly let down. I think you have to be part of the team. You can't 100% participate, but you can in spirit, even if you're not there every day. So I think culturally it is getting better, as Edith said. Now I'm too old, I've got grandchildren too, so I'll hand over.
Yes, absolutely agree. I mean, when I had my children, it was actually during my probation period. So it was the first 5 years when you have to actually prove yourself, do grant applications and things like that. And I remember submitting 2 or 3, I think it was 3 different grant applications, 2 or 3 weeks before giving my birth to my first son. And I thought, I'm so young, none of them will get accepted. And after I gave birth, we were shortlisted. And suddenly we had to go to interviews, interview panels. And of course, I was breastfeeding at the same time, like the baby couldn't be away for more than 2-3 hours. And I had a huge amount of support from my husband and my mother-in-law, who were coming to London with me and sort of with the baby trying to juggle things. I mean, this was a crazy time. Thinking about it retrospectively, it was, it is much more fun now to talk about it than it was then, I'm sure. But as Kay said, this is like a temporary sort of phase. And so at this sort of phase, you just have to be very lenient with yourself, right? I think that's the message I want to give to young women. Be lenient, keep going, and things are going to sort of converge in the right direction.
So for early career researchers, it's a little different. It's very, very hard to juggle having a family and being on a fixed term contract and not knowing where you're going to be in the next year or so, not knowing if that's going to get renewed. More and more now we have women delaying having families because they don't know what's going to happen next year. They don't know what's going to happen next. They feel like they can't take 9 months, 6 months, 5 months out of a very short contract. If they get funding that's very sort of short, a year or two, they're terrified to give that up. So the story is a little different down lower. Childcare is tough. If you're at a lower grade of pay, of salary in the university, you do not get the same childcare benefits. And if you're a college-only employee, you do not get the same benefits as you do for the university. It'll be on a college-by-college basis. So this is something that we hear a lot from the cohort of early career researchers.
And even if you basically have to put your name down on the nursery waiting list before you're pregnant.
Yeah, this is what I've heard. Is
in order to get a place at a nursery.
So I think that, these funding bodies who are, offering this funding for women or offering it for, people in early career positions have to recognize that these things, both men and women are facing, if they want to start a family, do they have to delay it? Do they have to wait? Do they have to, think all of this through? And it seems like some funding bodies are starting to listen. The British Academy have started a new sort of partial randomization allocation process for their small research grants, which you can say why you've taken time off from academia, and you can give a reason why maybe you haven't published in a year or two. And the random allocation, the randomization, makes it more fair for more people to get this funding. But I think, it's really tough down where my cohort is right now, and I feel it. I do not have kids. I will not have kids, but I feel it.
Thank you, Hilary. It is hard, and
Sorry to be pessimistic.
No, and it is also, it's hard for people coming out of DPhils and to think about where do I go next and what do I do, and all of that is really tough. It is tough. We've got another question.
Hi there. I have a question about building up women's confidence when it comes to approaching these fields. I remember reading somewhere, and I'm not 100% sure if this is true, but when there's a job posting and a man sees that they might not be qualified, they don't have all the qualifications, they'll still apply for it. And when a woman sees that and they don't have all the qualifications, they will choose not to apply for that. And I think women have so much potential, but it might not always be realized, not because they're incompetent, but they might struggle with the confidence. So what advice do you have for women to build their confidence so that they can achieve these things and they're not the ones holding themselves back?
I think you'll never cure that problem without training, without setting up proper training courses that explain to women exactly how they present themselves in a CV. It's quite astonishing that it still happens, but it does. And I think that's the institution's responsibility, that we ought to be running courses for young graduate students even of how to present themselves properly, so that we're on a level playing field. I think also interview committees need to make allowances for that, because it's going to take time to feed through. So look further than the ask. And again, at the Wellcome Trust, we had to look further than the ask when it was a female applicant. Did they really ask for the right amount of money to do all those mouse experiments? And for females, the answer was mostly no. I don't know what Anne did, but she was fairly gung-ho, so she probably asked for what she needed. But I think you really need to pay attention to it from both sides if you're going to see change.
I would want to also add to this, it's not just the confidence in terms of applying for a job, like if you have the right kind of skills or not. And I agree with you that often women sort of gauge themselves a little bit more harshly in that sort of judgment call. But it's also like after you get the job, how brave you are to try different things, like grant applications, like large grant applications is a good example that Kay mentioned. So, and I see that even with in some cases with DPhil students, where you see some students being extremely brave and sort of very confident about their work, and this helps them, no matter if it's like guys or girls. It really helps you to be confident and try things out. And when things don't go exactly your way, learn from it, right? And sort of do a detour. But not trying at all is definitely the wrong thing to do.
For me, it was what you mentioned about sponsors. and about mentorship, but that person who's going to be there to be, yes, go for the job. Yes, you're absolutely qualified for it. Someone who is senior and someone who's established that you can go to and say, oh, I'm not sure if I should do, yes, do it, yes. And that even gives, women confidence as well, I think.
One of the things I've been privileged to do for the last 10 years is to do the evaluations for the Conference for Undergraduate Women and Non-Binary People in Physics. And so that's over the last 10 years, it's been about 1,000 young people who are current undergraduates have come through that conference. And every year it's absolutely amazing because these are people, they're quite good at physics. They're on track to get a first or a 2-1. And they come into this conference going, no, I can't possibly have a career in physics. I can't do postgraduate study in physics. And 3 days of being with other people who are like them, of the academics who come and give their time and talk about their career, share their advice, talk about writing CVs, and they come out going, yep, I can. I'm going to apply for that PhD, I'm going to apply for that master's, I'm going to go down that career, I'm going to find myself a mentor. And it's one of the nicest parts of my job, is looking at their feedback and their comments after the conference and going, actually, yes, I can. And so I think often in physics we think, oh, how can we help these women to be better? Actually, maybe it's the discipline that needs changing. It's the culture that we have around the super competitiveness, the language that we use. Is it actually the women that are the problem? And I think my answer would be no. We are pretty much out of time. And before we actually move to drinks and refreshments and conversation, there's a very nice thing that we have to do, because every year the college gives out the Anne McLaren Award to 2 students who are working, and we've got, I think they're both in the room, is that right? Veronica and Kate? Yes, perfect. Would you two like to come out and we can, that would be really nice. Just to come out. So I'm going to say what you're studying, and then I thought I might ask each of you just to say very briefly what you're going to use the award to do so that people can get a sense. So Veronica is doing an MSc in Global Health Science and Epidemiology, and Kate is doing an MSc by Research in Women's Reproductive Health. I'm correct, is that right?
Yes,
Good.
that's correct. Hello. As you've mentioned, I'm Veronica. I'm studying global health science and epidemiology, and I just started writing my dissertation on genetic correlations between different iron markers and endometriosis. I suffer from endometriosis myself and also do a lot of advocacy on the condition, mainly in Germany. I'm originally from Austria, but I co-head an NGO called End Endosilence. And we're fighting for a national endometriosis strategy in Germany, but also raising awareness. In case anyone in the audience doesn't know, endometriosis is a disease that affects 10% of the female reproductive age population, where tissue that is similar to the uterine lining grows in organs outside of the uterus. Could be on any organ, not just the reproductive organs. And it can cause a lot of pain, a lot of heavy menstrual bleeding, infertility, but also digestive and urinary symptoms. And so what I will be using my award for is to present my research with an endosilence, probably in Frankfurt. I've also collaborated with a former Yale postdoc called Dora Koller, and we published a paper in JAMA together with her and a few other researchers on correlations between trauma, like psychological trauma, and endometriosis. And so currently she's based in Barcelona at the University of Barcelona, and the date is not fixed, but I would also, I'm hoping to also present together with her, yes. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you, that's fantastic. Kate, would you like to comment? I know, I'm sorry. Very briefly, tell us about what you
Hi, my name is Kate. So I am doing the Master's by Research this year, but normally I'm a medic, so it's like a year out to do that. And I am mostly interested in obstetrics and specifically on adverse outcomes of pregnancy and researching how we can improve risk prediction for that. And I'll be using my award mostly for research dissemination as well. So by the end of June, I'm going to the Royal Congress of the Royal College of Obs and Gynae conference in London, and I'll be presenting my first paper from my master's. And then I think it's beginning of July, I'm going to Prague as well to present at the Fetal Medicine Foundation. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to share my work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much, and we look forward to seeing how that research and your careers progress. We are coming to an end, and I think I'd like to just say thank you very much indeed to all of you for coming. I think we're hugely grateful to Kellogg College for remembering Anne McLaren in this way, and to our three panellists for your time and your expertise and wise words this evening. And thank you very much, and please do stay for refreshments at the back.